Hey everybody, hope your day is going well. You're back with another reaction. We're checking out this video right here, The Hidden Voice in I Want You. She's So Heavy, of course, by the Beatles on Abbey Road. And this is on the You Can't Unhear This YouTube channel. Link is in the description if you haven't checked it out. Really cool channel. And I love learning about these behind the scenes stories about the uh, recording process or the creative process or leaving in hidden ghost vocals, whatever it is, just these little things that you might not hear just as a casual listener like me. But I always love learning about these little trivia. And what also is cool to me is kind of coming together over the love of music, especially for the Beatles. You know, I'm a little late to the party, but hey, I finally arrived, and yeah, the Beatle bug has definitely caught me. It's got me pretty strong in its grips, and yeah, it's been amazing discovering their music. The first time I heard this song or reacted to it, I did not know much about them. And now, you know, after listening to all their albums and then coming to the song again on Abbey Road for a second time was quite a different experience. And I love John's vocals on this, especially how he's almost bending his voice like the guitar string. Oh, just amazing. All right, let's jump into this video.
At the end of the first side of the Beatles' iconic Abbey Road album is a track called I Want You, She's So Heavy. It's one of the most richly layered, intriguing, and powerful performances, and the last song that all four Beatles worked on together as a band.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But there's an interesting anomaly that you might not have noticed.
I know that Abbey Road was the last thing they worked on. They recorded together, but I didn't know this was then the final song that was coming together. And we're coming together a lot in this video. Of course, another great song on Abbey Road, you know, the first one. Come Together, so good too. Oh, this album is just on another level.
And as a fair warning, once I pointed out, you can't unhear this. It happens at around 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
Headphones recommended.
Listen
I got
carefully to the moment after John screams.
Oh,
Did you
I
hear
heard that.
Did you hear it?
I didn't know what they said there.
Someone in the background is clearly shouting something. There's an old theory that this was someone in the control room, yelling at John for screaming too loudly a moment before, which caused distortion on the tape. But that theory is wrong. For one,
Oh,
no one
really?
would dare shout at a Beatle during a recording session. But there's even
Good
more
point.
conclusive proof to discredit that theory, as I'll demonstrate in a moment. Let's listen again, this time to an...
You know what's so cool as well? And of course, now it's tough for coming, 60 years almost, late to the party because all the theorizing has been done. And of course, I can say so many things that people's like, dude, you don't know anything, which is true. Of course, I don't know all the things that were going on at the time and the theories, but that's was something I would love to do, still do. But you know, when it came to books or shows that were coming out at the time, you know, like a thing like Lost or you know the Song of Ice and Fire books that still aren't finished, you know, and theorizing on the forums and on the internet and talking about it with friends and hey, what does this mean and this little thing or predictions and what were they doing with this or what do you think they, you know, that's the if I was around back then, oh, if time travel is a thing, they always ask, where do you want to go? You want to see, you know, go to the birth of Jesus, the pyramids, the dinosaurs. Yeah, all that. But this point in time, Beatlemania and all and waiting for a record and talking about it at the time. I mean, this is a new one on my time travel list for sure.
proof to discredit that theory, as I'll demonstrate in a moment. Let's listen again, this time
And I'll
to an
discredit your
isolated track
discredit.
of only the drums. You probably noticed that the mysterious ghost vocal actually happens twice, once before John's distorted scream and again after. So clearly it couldn't have been a reaction to John's scream. The reason we're hearing it on the drum track is because the microphones used to record the drums are often sensitive enough to pick up extraneous noise in the recording studio. So what exactly is this mysterious ghost vocal we're hearing? Well, I think it's likely that it's one of the other Beatles, possibly Paul or even John himself. It picked up during the recording.
The first time I heard that voice, I did think it was John's voice. Just his inflection, even a little bit of the accent. It's very, it's hard to hear. That was my first thought. Adding to a decade-old theory. But I don't know. That was just the first time. It could be totally somebody else, of course.
It's one of the other Beatles, possibly Paul or even John himself. It picked up during the recording of the backing track. When isolated, it doesn't actually sound like words, but more like singing along to the bass line in that section. Here's the bass line. And again, the ghost vocal. To understand how this ghost vocal even made it into the mix, we need to examine the convoluted 8-month-long journey of the recording and re-recording of this song. We start back in January 1969 during the ill-fated Get Back sessions, when John introduced to the group a rough concept for a song called But the song wasn't formally recorded until February 22, 1969, when the band convened at Trident Studios under the guidance of producer George Martin. Starting in the evening and continuing until almost dawn, they knocked out a marathon session consisting of 35 takes of the song. On a side note, there's a funny outtake from this night in which one of the studio engineers reports that a neighbor called to complain about the noise the band was making at such a late hour.
What are they doing here at this time of night?
Some folk get the house in such a lousy district.
Anyway, the next day, the band met to review the 35 takes they had recorded.
I mean, that's got to be the most famous noise complaint ever made. I don't... Dude, you're making too much noise. It's the Beatles. Get out of here.
The house in such a lousy district.
Anyway, the next day, the band met to review the 35 takes they had recorded. John, being very picky, wasn't happy with any single take all the way through. So instead, he had the engineers join 3 different takes, take 9, take 20, and take 32, into one single backing track. And the ghost vocal probably comes from one of these takes, maybe take 20. This nearly seamless combination of 3 takes was only the beginning of the extensive work that the group would apply to the track over the next 6 months. Just 2 days later, on February 24th, the group recorded piano, guitar, tambourine, and even a reverse cymbal. But interestingly, none of these overdubs were used on the final track. The band then took a break from working on the song for almost 2 months. On April 18th, John and George returned to the studio to overdub more guitar tracks to enhance the heavy, droning sound that John had in mind.
That is so good. Huh? Wow, wow, wow.
On April 20th, Ringo added conga drums. And guest keyboardist Billy Preston added a groovy organ track. On August 8, 1969, back at Abbey Road Studios, John, in one of his experimental moods, decided to use a then cutting-edge Moog analog synthesizer to add white noise that would incrementally get louder during the last 2 minutes of the song. Ringo also added a bit more percussion to the outro at the same session. Oddly enough, these new overdubs were not added to the latest version of the song from April, but instead to the original recording from Trident Studios back in February.
Wow.
So now there were effectively 2 versions of the song. The version from April, using the February backing track plus overdubbed organ, congas, and extra guitars, and this version from August 8th with the added white noise and extra percussion. But if you can believe it, this was still not the end of the madness. A few days later, on August 11th, John, Paul, and George added gorgeous harmonized vocals. These vocals were then overdubbed onto both versions of the recording, since John couldn't decide which version he ultimately preferred. On August 20th, with the album's completion date approaching, the band finally had to answer the question of what to do with the 2 existing versions of the song. John ultimately decided on a compromise that was very similar to what he had requested a few years earlier for Strawberry Fields Forever. Combine them. And so the band opted to keep the April version for the first 4 minutes and 37 seconds, and
Really?
cut to the February version for the rest of the song. So what you're hearing today is essentially a combination of those two versions. With the stitching of the mixes figured out, John had one last trick up his sleeve. Instead of having the song end with a normal fade out or on the last note of the performance, he asked the engineers to simply cut the tape, creating an abrupt ending that would mark the end of side one of Abbey Road. But that wasn't the only abrupt end on that day. It was also the last time that all four Beatles were present together working at Abbey Road Studios, the place they had called their professional home for the past 7 years, where countless pop masterpieces had been forged. It was truly the end of an era. Now, that's heavy.
Hey,
All the overdubbing and mixing complexity aside, what really makes I Want You so sublime is the musicianship itself. It features every element that made the Beatles so magical, wrapped in a transcendent blowout performance. And the isolated tracks reveal just how richly layered this masterpiece is. For example, Paul's masterful bass lines during the outro.
That's cool to hear.
Even better, on the isolated drum track, you can hear an awesome guitar solo that's lost in the final mix. I can't say enough about how much I adore this song. It's as brooding and heavy as anything that Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, or the Velvet Underground were doing around this time. And no matter how many times I've heard it, I find it equally hypnotizing. And somehow, most fittingly, their very last song rhymes both in sound and in meaning with their very first single from all the way back in 1962.
Love me do.
Wow, what a difference, huh?
Funny how that turned out. Anyway, what do you think about I Want You, She's So Heavy? Let me know in the comments,
Fantastic.
and as always, please subscribe to my channel for more episodes. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, that is a great track. And, you know, that contrast and experiencing that evolution now for myself. Evolution is even an understatement, right? And then coming back to the track, you know, is a very different thing than just, you know, listening to somebody's final work. And that's not going to be the case with every artist, because not every artist has an upwards evolution or track, you know, a path like that. You know, sometimes it's downward. Sometimes the first album is the best, you know, if they worked a long time on it. You know, so it's different for every artist. In this case, it's, you know, the steep climb and change, and you can still love the old stuff and the new. It's just there's something there for everybody. It's amazing. And yeah, I Want You is really great. And of course, like you said, Black Sabbath is some, you would think, if you know, for the untrained ear, and if you don't know anything too, if you don't know too much, you could think, whoa, this is kind of like Black Sabbath. But of course, you know, I've read 3 memoirs of Black Sabbath members, and at least 2 of them, you know, said their lives changed when they heard the Beatles for the first time. I think one of them was more a Cliff Richards and the Shadows fan. But you know, all these artists that were around at the time were already inspired by the earlier work of the Beatles. So that is just, it's amazing. And then they spawned so many other sounds and subgenres. Fantastic. This was cool. Not only learning about that hidden voice, but there was other information about the track in it that I didn't know. So this is only a title, and that was covered in the video, but there was other things covered in this video too, which was really interesting. And that guitar solo there that was recorded on the isolated drum track, I would have loved to hear that with better quality. Really cool stuff. Great song. Thank you for being here. Hope you have a great day. Goodbye.